The summer sun beat down mercilessly on Junta, Colorado, as Willow Greene stepped off the train, her face flushed with anticipation and trepidation. The year was 1879, and the West was still wild enough to make a woman traveling alone think twice about every decision. But Willow had no choice. Her brother's letter had been clear. He needed her help with his ranch, and after losing her teaching position back east, she had nowhere else to go. The platform bustled with activity, cowboys loading supplies, families reuniting, and merchants hawking their wares. Willow clutched her small valise, scanning the crowd for her brother Richard. When no familiar face appeared, she sighed and approached the station master. "Excuse me, sir. I'm looking for the Greene Ranch. My brother Richard was supposed to meet me." The station master, a weathered man with kind eyes, frowned slightly. "Greene Ranch is about 5 miles north of town, madam. Haven't seen Richard in town for a spell, though." Willow's heart sank. "Is there perhaps a stage or someone who might take me there?" "Stage don't run that way, miss." The man scratched his beard thoughtfully. "But Sawyer Preston's heading that direction. He might give you a ride if you ask nice." He nodded toward a tall figure loading supplies onto a wagon. Even from a distance, Willow could see the man's broad shoulders and the way his Stetson sat low over his eyes. A true cowboy with a confidence that seemed to radiate from him. With no other options, Willow approached him cautiously. "Excuse me, Mr. Preston." He turned, and Willow found herself looking into the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face. He tipped his hat politely. "Madam, I'm Willow Greene. I understand you might be heading in the direction of my brother's ranch." Recognition flickered across his features. "Richard's sister. He mentioned you'd be arriving." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I'm heading that way. Happy to give you a ride." There was something in his tone that made Willow uneasy, but she had little choice. "Thank you." "That's very kind." As they traveled, the landscape of southeastern Colorado stretched out before them, rolling plains giving way to scattered cottonwoods near creeks and arroyos. The silence between them grew uncomfortable until Willow finally spoke. "How do you know my brother, Mr. Preston?" "Sawyer, please." He kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "Our ranches neighbor each other. We share water rights to the creek between our properties." "That sounds amicable." Sawyer's jaw tightened. "It was, until recently." Willow waited for him to elaborate, but he remained silent. The wagon jostled over the rutted trail, and Willow gripped the seat to steady herself. "Is something wrong with my brother, Mr. Preston? You seem hesitant to speak of him." Sawyer sighed, finally glancing her way. "Miss Greene, I don't know how to tell you this, but Richard hasn't been seen in town for nearly 3 weeks. Some folks are concerned." Alarm shot through her. "What? But his letter. He asked me to come help with the ranch." "When was that letter sent?" "Nearly a month ago." Sawyer nodded grimly. "A lot can happen in a month out here." Fear clutched at Willow's heart. "Please, take me to his ranch immediately." When they arrived at the Greene property, Willow's worst fears seemed confirmed. The modest ranch house stood silent, with no smoke rising from the chimney. The corral held only 2 horses that looked thin and neglected. "Stay here," Sawyer instructed as he climbed down from the wagon. "I will not," Willow replied, gathering her skirts and descending before he could help her. "This is my brother's home." Together they approached the house. Sawyer drew his revolver, a move that sent a chill down Willow's spine. He pushed open the door cautiously. The interior was a mess, furniture overturned, papers scattered. But no sign of violence, no blood. Just the chaos of someone who had left in a hurry or been taken against their will. "Richard," Willow called, moving from room to room. The small house yielded no clues, only more questions. In what appeared to be her brother's study, Willow found a half-written letter addressed to her. The words made her blood run cold. "Willow, I fear I've made a terrible mistake. Men have been watching the ranch. If anything happens to me, do not trust the letter ended there." "What does it mean?" she whispered, showing it to Sawyer. He read it quickly, his expression darkening. "I don't know, but I've heard rumors of land grabbers in the area. Men who want to consolidate ranches for the railroad. And you think they might have what forced him off his land, or worse." Sawyer's blunt honesty was frightening. "Miss Greene, I don't think you should stay here alone." "I have nowhere else to go, Mr. Preston." He looked around the disheveled room. "My ranch house has a spare room. You'd be safer there until we figure out what happened to your brother." Willow hesitated. She barely knew this man. Going with him could be dangerous in its own way. But staying alone in this empty house, with whoever had threatened her brother potentially returning. "I need to tend to those horses first," she said, making her decision. "Then I'll gather some belongings." Sawyer nodded, respect flickering in his eyes at her practicality. "I'll help with the horses." As they worked side by side in the corral, Willow studied Sawyer Preston more carefully. His movements were efficient, his hands gentle with the animals despite their size and strength. He spoke softly to the horses, and they responded to him, trusting him instinctively. "You're good with them," she observed. "Animals don't lie or cheat," he replied. "Makes them better company than most folks." "Is that why you live out here, away from town?" He smiled slightly, the expression transforming his serious face. "That, and I've got about 200 head of cattle that need tending. A substantial operation. Started with just 20 head 6 years ago, built it up slow and steady." Pride colored his voice. "Your brother was doing well too, that's why it doesn't make sense." Willow nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "We'll find him." As they finished with the horses, loading them into Sawyer's wagon to take to his ranch, dark clouds began to gather on the horizon. The late afternoon sky turned an ominous gray-green. "Storm's coming," Sawyer observed. "We should hurry." Willow quickly gathered essentials from the house clothing, her brother's ledger, and the half-finished letter. As they departed, she couldn't help looking back at the silent ranch house, wondering if her brother would ever return to it. Sawyer's ranch proved to be larger than her brother's, with a substantial 2-story house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. A Mexican man emerged from the barn as they approached. "Miguel," Sawyer called. "This is Miss Greene, Richard's sister. She'll be staying with us for a while." Miguel nodded respectfully to Willow. "Señorita, I will tell Maria to prepare a room." Thunder rumbled in the distance as Sawyer helped Willow down from the wagon. "Miguel and Maria Alvarez help me run things. They live in the smaller house behind the main one. Good people." The first drops of rain began to fall as they hurried toward the house. Inside, Willow found the home surprisingly well appointed for a bachelor rancher. The furniture was solid and well crafted, the floors covered with colorful rugs. A bookshelf lined one wall, filled with volumes that suggested their owner was well read. Maria, a kind-faced woman in her 40s, appeared from the kitchen. "Señor Sawyer, the room is ready for the señorita." She smiled warmly at Willow. "Dinner will be ready soon. You must be hungry after your journey." "Thank you," Willow said gratefully, suddenly aware of her exhaustion. Maria showed her to a comfortable bedroom upstairs. "This was Señora Preston's room," she explained. "Sawyer's mother. She passed 3 winters ago. I'm sorry to hear that." She was a good woman, taught school in town before she married. Maria laid fresh towels on the dresser. "Like you know, Señor Richard mentioned his sister was a teacher." "Yes, in Boston." Willow looked around the room, touched by the feminine touches that remained delicate curtains, a quilted bedspread, a silver brush set on the dresser. "Rest now. I will call when dinner is ready." Left alone, Willow sat on the bed and finally allowed herself a moment of weakness. Tears spilled down her cheeks as worry for her brother overwhelmed her. What had happened to him? What mistake had he made? And why had she been summoned here if he knew he was in danger? The storm raged outside, lightning illuminating the room in brief flashes. Willow wiped her tears, determined to be strong. She had traveled across the country alone. She could face whatever challenges lay ahead. With renewed resolve, she unpacked her few belongings and washed her face in the basin provided. Dinner was a quiet affair, with Sawyer preoccupied and Willow too tired for conversation. Maria had prepared a delicious stew with fresh bread, and Willow realized how hungry she had been. "Tomorrow we'll ride into town," Sawyer said as they finished eating. "Talk to the sheriff about your brother. See if anyone's heard anything." "Thank you." Willow hesitated, then asked, "Mr. Preston, Sawyer, please." "Sawyer, why are you helping me? You barely know me or my brother." He considered her question, his blue eyes thoughtful. "Out here, neighbors look out for each other. It's how we survive." He paused. "And Richard spoke highly of you, said you were as stubborn as he was but twice as smart." That brought a small smile to Willow's face. "That sounds like him. Get some rest, Miss Greene. Tomorrow will be a long day." "Willow," she corrected. "If I'm to call you Sawyer, you should call me Willow." He nodded, the hint of a smile touching his lips. "Good night, Willow." That night, despite her exhaustion, Willow slept fitfully. Dreams of her brother calling for help plagued her, and she woke several times to the sound of the storm battering the house. By morning, however, the sky had cleared, revealing a washed, clean landscape that sparkled in the early light. Willow dressed carefully in her most practical outfit, a navy skirt and white shirtwaist that could withstand travel. When she descended the stairs, she found Sawyer already at the table, examining papers with a furrowed brow. "Good morning," she said. He looked up, quickly gathering the papers. "Morning. Sleep well?" "Well enough. Are those ranch accounts?" "Something like that." He seemed reluctant to elaborate. "Maria's left coffee and biscuits. We should head to town after you've eaten." The ride to La Junta was more comfortable in the clear morning air. Sawyer drove the wagon with confidence, occasionally pointing out features of the landscape or explaining aspects of ranching that differed from farming back east. "The challenge here is water," he explained. "Without reliable access, cattle can't survive. That creek that runs between our properties, it's worth more than gold." "Is that what the trouble with my brother was about? Water rights?" Sawyer frowned. "No, we had a solid agreement. Richard was fair about it." He glanced at her. "The trouble came from elsewhere." Before she could press him further, they arrived in town. La Junta was busier than it had been the previous day, with cowboys and townspeople going about their business. Sawyer helped Willow down from the wagon and led her toward a small building with "Sheriff" painted on a wooden sign. Inside, they found a heavy-set man with a graying mustache sitting behind a desk. He looked up as they entered, surprise registering on his face. "Preston, didn't expect to see you in town today." "Sheriff Hayes, this is Miss Willow Greene, Richard's sister from back east." The sheriff's expression changed to one of concern. "Miss Greene, I'm sorry about your brother's situation." "What exactly is my brother's situation, Sheriff?" Willow asked directly. "No one seems willing to tell me plainly what's happened." Sheriff Hayes exchanged a look with Sawyer. "Miss Greene, your brother's been accused of rustling cattle from the Bar T Ranch. Terrence Walsh claims to have evidence." Willow gasped. "That's preposterous. My brother is no thief." "I agree," Sawyer said firmly. "Richard Greene is one of the most honest men I know," the sheriff sighed. "Walsh has 3 witnesses who claim they saw Richard with stolen cattle bearing Bar T brands." "And where is my brother now?" Willow demanded. "That's the problem, madam. He disappeared before I could question him. Makes him look guilty, running like that. Or makes it look like he feared for his life, Sawyer suggested. Walsh isn't known for his patience or fairness. Willow looked between the two men. Who is this Walsh? Owns the largest spread in the county, the sheriff explained. Came in about 5 years ago, been buying up land ever since. Not popular, but powerful. And you think he might have fabricated these accusations against my brother? Why? Sawyer answered before the sheriff could. Richard's land controls access to the most reliable water source in the area. Walsh has been trying to buy him out for months. Understanding dawned on Willow, and if my brother is branded a criminal, his land could be seized, Sawyer finished, or bought for a fraction of its worth. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. That's speculation, Preston. We don't have evidence of that. Have you searched for Richard? Willow asked. Did a cursory look around his property when he was reported missing. Didn't find anything suspicious. And that was sufficient. Willow couldn't keep the indignation from her voice. The sheriff had the grace to look embarrassed. Miss Greene, I've got limited resources. Walsh has been pushing me to declare your brother a fugitive and seize his property for the territory. You can't do that, Willow protested. Haven't yet, the sheriff said, but it's been 3 weeks. Can't hold off forever. As they left the sheriff's office, Willow's mind raced. This Walsh person. He's behind my brother's disappearance, I'm certain of it. Sawyer guided her through the busy street. Probably, but proving it won't be easy. We need to find Richard. He'd never abandon his ranch voluntarily, I agree, but we need to be careful. Walsh has men all over the county. Sawyer lowered his voice. He's not above using force to get what he wants. Are you saying he might have? Willow couldn't finish the terrible thought. I don't know, but Richard's a fighter. If he could contact us, he would have. Sawyer looked troubled. We should talk to Walsh directly. He doesn't know you're here yet. That might give us an advantage. Where can we find him? He'll be at the saloon around noon. Always stops in when he's in town. They spent the next hour gathering supplies and discreetly asking questions around town. No one had seen Richard Greene for weeks, though a few mentioned seeing strangers around his property before his disappearance. As noon approached, they headed toward the Silver Dollar Saloon. Willow hesitated at the entrance. Is it appropriate for me to enter such an establishment? Sawyer's mouth quirked. Probably not, but we need answers. Steeling herself, Willow followed him inside. The saloon was dimly lit, smelling of whiskey and tobacco. Several men played cards at tables while others stood at the long bar. Conversations quieted as Willow entered, curious gazes following her movement. A large man sat at a corner table, surrounded by 3 others who had the hard look of hired guns. His expensive suit and gold watch marked him as different from the cowboys and townspeople. That's Walsh, Sawyer murmured. Willow straightened her shoulders and marched directly to the table, ignoring Sawyer's attempt to hold her back. The men looked up in surprise as she approached. Mr. Walsh, I presume. The large man raised an eyebrow. And who might you be, miss? Willow Greene. Richard Greene's sister. A flash of something surprise. Concern crossed Walsh's face before his expression settled into polite interest. Miss Greene, I wasn't aware Richard had family coming to visit. I doubt there's much about my brother's affairs that legitimately concerns you, Mr. Walsh. Willow kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. Including the preposterous accusations you've made against him. Walsh chuckled, looking to his companions. Spirited, isn't she? He returned his attention to Willow. Miss Greene, I simply reported facts. Cattle bearing my brand were found on your brother's property. What conclusion would you have me draw? Perhaps that someone planted them there to discredit him, Sawyer suggested, stepping up beside Willow. Walsh's amusement faded. Preston, still poking your nose where it doesn't belong. When my neighbors are falsely accused, it becomes my business." Walsh stood, revealing his impressive height and girth. "Your loyalty is admirable if misplaced. Richard Greene ran because he's guilty. Simple as that." "My brother is not a thief," Willow insisted, "and I intend to prove it." Walsh studied her with cold eyes. "Miss Greene, this is dangerous country for a woman alone. You'd be wise to sell your brother's worthless property and return east while you can." "Is that a threat, Mr. Walsh? Consider it friendly advice." He nodded to his men. "We're done here." As Walsh and his men left the saloon, Willow turned to Sawyer. "He knows something. I could see it in his eyes when I mentioned Richard." Sawyer nodded grimly. "And now he knows you're here. We need to be careful." That evening, as they returned to Sawyer's ranch, the conversation turned to strategy. Maria served them a hearty supper while they discussed their options. "We need to search your brother's property more thoroughly," Sawyer suggested. "The sheriff's cursory look probably missed something." "I agree." Willow hesitated. "And we should examine his ledgers and correspondence. There might be clues about what he discovered that put him in danger." Sawyer looked thoughtful. "Walsh arrived in the area 5 years ago with plenty of money to buy land. Nobody knows where he came from or how he got so wealthy. You think my brother might have uncovered something about his past? It's possible. Richard was smart, observant." As they finished eating, Miguel entered with a worried expression. "Senor Sawyer, riders coming, 6 men." Sawyer was on his feet instantly. "Walsh's men, get your rifle, Miguel." He turned to Willow. "Stay inside with Maria." "What are they going to do?" Willow asked, fear clutching at her heart. "Probably just trying to intimidate us." Sawyer checked his revolver. "But we won't take chances." Willow watched from the window as Sawyer and Miguel positioned themselves on the porch, weapons visible but not aimed. The riders approached slowly, stopping a respectful distance from the house. Even in the fading light, Willow recognized Walsh at the head of the group. Through the partially open window, she could hear their conversation. "Evening, Preston," Walsh called. "Just thought we'd pay a neighborly visit." "Kind of late for social calls," Sawyer replied evenly. Walsh chuckled. "Just wanted to make sure Miss Greene was settling in comfortably. It's not safe for a lady alone in these parts." "She's not alone." "No, she's not." Walsh's voice hardened. "She's staying with a man with no relation to her. Quite scandalous, wouldn't you say?" Sawyer didn't rise to the bait. "State your business, Walsh." "Just delivering a message. The territorial judge arrives next week. I'll be filing formal charges against Richard Greene then. The property will be auctioned off to cover damages." Walsh paused. "Unless, of course, Miss Greene decides to sell to me directly before then. That won't happen. We'll see." Walsh turned his horse. "Good evening, Preston. Miss Greene." He tipped his hat toward the window where Willow stood, making it clear he'd known she was listening. As the riders departed, Sawyer and Miguel remained vigilant until they disappeared into the darkness. When Sawyer returned inside, his expression was grim. "He's accelerating his plans," he told Willow. "We have less than a week to find evidence clearing your brother." That night, unable to sleep, Willow examined her brother's ledger by lamplight. Richard had been meticulous in his record-keeping, noting every expenditure and income source. Nothing seemed unusual until she reached entries from 2 months prior. Richard had made several trips to Denver, listing expenses but no purpose for the journey. A folded paper slipped from between the pages, a receipt from a Denver records office. Richard had paid for information on land titles and corporate registrations. When Willow showed Sawyer the next morning, his eyes lit with understanding. He was investigating Walsh's business dealings. But why? Let's find out. We need to search your brother's house again thoroughly this time. They rode to the Greene ranch early, taking care to watch for Walsh's men along the way. The house stood silent and undisturbed as they approached. Inside, they began a methodical search. Willow examined her brother's desk more carefully while Sawyer checked for hiding places in the walls and floors. Richard always had a hiding spot for important papers, Willow mused. Even as children, he kept a secret compartment in his wooden box. Sawyer looked up sharply. The floorboards in his bedroom, did you notice they are newer than the rest of the house? Together they hurried to the bedroom. Sure enough, several boards near the bed appeared to have been replaced recently. Sawyer used a knife to pry one up, revealing a small space beneath. Inside was a tin box. Willow opened it with trembling hands. Inside were several documents, including a letter addressed to her in case of emergency. "Willow," she read aloud, "if you're reading this, I'm either dead or in hiding. Terrence Walsh is not who he claims to be. His real name is Thomas Whitfield, wanted in Missouri for fraud and suspected of murder. He's been buying land using money stolen from investors back east. I've gathered evidence, but he discovered my investigation. Trust Sawyer Preston, he's the only one I'm certain isn't in Walsh's pocket. The proof is hidden in the old line shack by Cottonwood Creek. Be careful, little sister. Love, Richard." Sawyer whistled low. "Whitfield. I remember reading about that case. He swindled hundreds of people with a fake railroad investment scheme. Is my brother alive?" Willow asked, her voice breaking. "This letter suggests he went into hiding, not that he's dead." Sawyer looked hopeful. "The line shack he mentioned is on the border between our properties. We should go there immediately." As they prepared to leave, the sound of approaching horses made them freeze. Through the window they saw Walsh and 4 men riding toward the house. "They must have been watching the place," Sawyer muttered. "We need to leave now. Is there a back way out?" "Through the kitchen," Willow said, quickly gathering the documents. They slipped out the rear door just as the riders reached the front of the house. Moving quietly, they managed to reach their horses tethered behind the barn. Sawyer helped Willow mount quickly, then swung onto his own horse. "Ride for the creek," he whispered. "I know a path they won't expect." They galloped away from the house, keeping to a shallow ravine that provided some cover. Behind them, shouts indicated their escape had been discovered. Gunshots rang out, but they were already out of effective range. Sawyer led them on a winding route, crossing the creek several times to confuse their trail. After an hour of hard riding, they approached a small, weathered cabin tucked among cottonwood trees. "The line shack," Sawyer explained as they dismantled. "We should be safe here for a while." Inside, the cabin was sparse but serviceable, with a small stove, a table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed. Sawyer immediately began searching for Richard's hidden evidence while Willow kept watch at the window. "Found something," Sawyer announced, pulling up a loose floorboard beneath the bed. He extracted a waterproof oilskin package. Inside were documents that confirmed Walsh's true identity as Thomas Whitfield, including wanted posters and newspaper clippings about his crimes in Missouri. Most damning was a letter from a banker in Denver confirming that funds used to purchase the Bar T Ranch had been wire transferred from a bank involved in Whitfield's investment scheme. "This is enough to bring him down," Sawyer said excitedly. "But we need to get it to federal authorities, not just the local sheriff." "You think the sheriff is involved with Walsh? Not deliberately corrupt, but definitely intimidated." Sawyer considered their options. "There's a U.S. Marshal who passes through La Junta every few weeks. He's due tomorrow or the next day. But how do we reach him without Walsh intercepting us?" Sawyer smiled slightly. "I know people in town we can trust. Miguel can take a message." As evening approached, they decided to remain at the line shack overnight. Sawyer built a small fire in the stove, being careful to minimize smoke that might give away their position. The temperature dropped with the sun, and soon the small cabin grew chilly. Sawyer offered Willow his coat. "Take the bed. I'll keep watch." "You need rest too," she protested. "I'm used to long nights during calving season. This is nothing." Willow stubbornly pulled one of the chairs closer to the stove. "Then we'll both keep watch." Sawyer's expression softened as he looked at her. "You're a lot like your brother, stubborn as a mule." "Richard and I may have our differences, but we share that quality," she admitted. "I won't give up until he's safe and Walsh or Whitfield faces justice. We'll make sure of it." As the night deepened, they talked quietly, sharing stories of their lives. Willow learned that Sawyer had come west after the war between the states, seeking a fresh start after losing his family's Virginia plantation. He'd worked as a cowhand for years, before saving enough to buy his own small spread, gradually building it into a successful operation. In turn, she told him about her life in Boston, teaching at a girls' academy until budget cuts left her without position. Richard's letter had seemed providential at the time. "I never imagined I'd find myself in the middle of such drama," she confessed. "The West has a way of testing people," Sawyer replied, "showing what they're really made of." He looked at her with admiration. "Most Eastern ladies would have collapsed into hysterics by now." Willow smiled. "Perhaps I'm not most ladies." "No," he agreed softly, "you certainly aren't." Their eyes met across the small space, and Willow felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear or anxiety. Despite the danger they faced, she felt oddly safe in Sawyer's presence. The moment was broken by a sound outside, a branch snapping underfoot. Instantly, Sawyer extinguished the lamp and moved to the window, gun drawn. Willow held her breath, listening to the night sounds. "Someone's out there," Sawyer whispered. Before he could say more, a voice called from the darkness. "Sawyer, it's Richard, don't shoot." Willow gasped. "Richard." Sawyer cautiously opened the door, keeping his gun ready. A figure emerged from the shadows, thin and bearded, but unmistakably Richard Greene. "Richard!" Willow rushed forward, embracing her brother tightly. "Careful," he winced. "Ribs aren't fully healed." Sawyer quickly closed and barred the door. "Where have you been? What happened?" Richard sank onto one of the chairs, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "Walsh's men caught me gathering evidence in town, beat me pretty badly and left me for dead in a gully south of here. A Cheyenne hunting party found me, nursed me back to health." "We found your evidence," Willow told him, showing him the documents. "We know Walsh is really Thomas Whitfield." Richard nodded. "I was trying to get proof to the federal authorities when they caught me." He looked at Sawyer. "How did you get involved in this mess?" "Your sister arrived looking for you. Couldn't let her face Walsh alone." Richard studied them both, noting something in their interaction that brought a knowing smile to his face despite his obvious pain. "Seems I owe you a debt, Preston." "We need to get these documents to the U.S. Marshal," Sawyer said. "He should be in La Junta tomorrow." "Walsh will be watching the town," Richard warned. "Miguel can help," Sawyer assured him. "But we should move at first light. This place won't stay safe for long." That night, Willow insisted her brother take the bed while she and Sawyer kept watch by the stove. As Richard slept, they spoke in hushed tones, planning their next moves. "Once this is over," Sawyer said hesitantly, "what will you do? Return to Boston?" The question caught Willow by surprise. She hadn't thought beyond finding her brother and clearing his name. I'm not sure. There's nothing for me in Boston now." "You could stay," Sawyer suggested, his voice carefully neutral. "Colorado has need of good teachers." "Is that the only reason I might stay?" Willow asked boldly, surprising herself with her directness. In the dim light of the stove, she saw color rise in Sawyer's face. "No," he admitted quietly. "Not the only reason." Before they could continue the conversation, Richard stirred, groaning in his sleep. Willow moved to check on him, finding him feverish and restless. His wounds may be infected, she worried. Sawyer examined Richard in the faint light. We need to get him to a doctor, but town isn't safe. What about your ranch? Could Miguel bring a doctor there? Too risky. Walsh will be watching my place too. Sawyer thought for a moment. There's a widow who lives about 5 miles east, Martha Jenkins. Her husband was a doctor, taught her a fair bit before he passed. She might be able to help. At first light, they carefully moved Richard onto Sawyer's horse. Willow rode behind her brother to keep him steady, while Sawyer led them on foot. They traveled slowly through the underbrush along the creek, avoiding open areas where they might be spotted. By mid-morning, they reached a small, neat homestead. A woman in her 50s emerged from the house as they approached, her expression changing from wariness to concern when she saw Richard's condition. "Martha," Sawyer called. "We need help. Bring him inside," she directed without hesitation. Martha Jenkins proved to be capable and efficient. She diagnosed Richard with 2 broken ribs and a serious infection from an untreated wound on his back. With Willow's assistance, she cleaned and dressed the wound, then prepared a poultice of herbs. "He needs rest and medicine," Martha declared, "and you all need a safe place to stay." "We can't put you in danger," Sawyer protested. Martha snorted. "Terrence Walsh doesn't frighten me. Besides, no one will look for you here." While Richard rested, Sawyer explained their situation to Martha. She listened gravely, then offered a solution. "My late husband's brother is the telegraph operator in La Junta. He can get a message to the marshal without raising suspicion." By afternoon, Miguel had been summoned and dispatched to town with the evidence and instructions for Martha's brother-in-law. All they could do now was wait and hope the marshal would arrive before Walsh discovered their location. As evening approached, Willow sat on Martha's porch, watching the sunset paint the plains in gold and crimson. Sawyer joined her, offering a cup of coffee. "Richard's fever is down," he told her. "Martha's remedies seem to be working." "Thank goodness." Willow accepted the coffee gratefully. "I can't believe how much has happened since I arrived yesterday. It feels like weeks. Time moves differently out here sometimes." Sawyer settled beside her on the porch step. "Crisis has a way of revealing character quickly." "And what has it revealed about me?" Willow asked, curious. Sawyer looked at her, his blue eyes serious. "That you're brave, resourceful, loyal." He paused. "Beautiful." The compliment brought warmth to Willow's cheeks. "Mr. Preston, I believe you're flirting with me in the midst of mortal danger. Would you prefer I wait for a more appropriate time?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I'd prefer you not wait at all," she replied boldly. Before Sawyer could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Sawyer was on his feet instantly, hand moving to his gun. "Inside," he ordered. "Could be Walsh's men." They hurried into the house, Sawyer quickly explaining the situation to Martha. She calmly retrieved a shotgun from beside the door. "Front bedroom has the best view of the approach," she said. "Back door leads to the root cellar if we need to hide." Through the bedroom window, they watched as 3 riders approached. Relief flooded through Willow as she recognized the lead rider's badge catching the last rays of sunlight. "It's the marshal," Sawyer confirmed. U.S. Marshal James Cooper proved to be a taciturn but efficient man. He reviewed the evidence against Walsh/Whitfield with growing interest. "Been after this snake for 3 years," he explained. "He's slippery. Disappeared from Missouri just ahead of a lynch mob." He looked at Richard, who had been helped to a chair in Martha's parlor. "Your testimony will be crucial, Mr. Greene." "You'll have it," Richard promised. "Once I can ride without falling off my horse." The marshal nodded. "I'm heading back to town tonight with 2 deputies. We'll arrest Walsh at first light." He looked at Sawyer. "Keep everyone here until I send word it's safe." After the marshal departed, the atmosphere in the house lightened considerably. Martha prepared a hearty dinner, and even Richard managed to eat a little. As night fell, sleeping arrangements were made, Richard in the spare bedroom, Martha in her room, and Sawyer and Willow taking turns keeping watch in the parlor. During her watch, Willow found herself thinking about the future. If Walsh was arrested, Richard would be cleared and his property saved. But what then? Would she stay in Colorado or return east? And what of her growing feelings for Sawyer Preston? As if summoned by her thoughts, Sawyer appeared from the kitchen with fresh coffee. "Couldn't sleep," he explained, pouring her a cup before sitting beside her on the small sofa. "Too much excitement," Willow suggested. "Too many thoughts," he corrected. "About what happens after this is resolved." Willow's heart quickened. "What do you want to happen?" Sawyer set his coffee down, turning to face her. "I want you to stay, Willow. Not just because Colorado needs teachers, but because—" He hesitated, then continued with determination. "Because I've never met anyone like you. In just 2 days, you've shown more courage and integrity than most show in a lifetime." "We've only just met," she reminded him, though her heart wasn't in the objection. "True. And I'm not suggesting we rush into anything." He took her hand carefully. "Just that you consider staying long enough for us to discover what might develop between us." Willow looked at their joined hands. "I must admit, the prospect is appealing." Before Sawyer could respond, a sound outside caught their attention, the distant rumble of thunder, unusual for the clear night. But as it grew louder, recognition dawned. "Fire," Sawyer said, moving to the window. "The barn's on fire." They rushed to wake the others. Outside, flames were already consuming Martha's barn. In the flickering light, they could see riders circling the property. "Walsh," Richard said grimly. "He must have learned the marshal's in town." "We need to get to the root cellar," Martha urged. "It's our best chance." Before they could move, a flaming arrow struck the roof of the house. Within minutes, more followed, and soon the wooden shingles were ablaze. "We're trapped," Willow realized with horror. The house had only 2 exits, both visible to the riders outside. Sawyer assessed the situation quickly. "Martha, is there another way out?" "The old well," she remembered. "Behind the pantry. Jacob covered it with boards years ago, but it connects to a dry creek bed." They hurried to the pantry as smoke began filling the house. Richard and Sawyer pried up the floorboards, revealing a dark shaft beneath. A rotting wooden ladder led down into darkness. "I'll go first," Martha said. "Know the way best." One by one, they descended into the cool darkness of the old well. Above them, the house crackled as the fire spread. Willow went third, with Sawyer insisting on coming last. The passage at the bottom was narrow but navigable, leading away from the house toward a shallow ravine. They crawled through the darkness, guided by Martha's confident directions. After what seemed an eternity, they emerged into the open air, hidden by the ravine from the view of Walsh's men. "We need to reach town," Sawyer whispered. "The marshal needs to know what's happening." "It's 5 miles on foot," Martha warned. "We have no choice." They set off through the darkness, staying within the ravine as long as possible before cutting across open country toward La Junta. Richard struggled with his injuries, but determination kept him moving. By dawn, they reached the outskirts of town, exhausted and smoke-stained. The town was already stirring with unusual activity. Men on horseback rode quickly through the streets, and a crowd had gathered outside the sheriff's office. Keeping to side streets, they approached cautiously. A friendly shopkeeper recognized Martha and ushered them inside his store. "What's happening out there?" Sawyer asked. "Marshall tried to arrest Walsh at his hotel room at dawn," the shopkeeper explained excitedly. "There was a gunfight. Walsh escaped, but he's wounded. Marshall's got men searching the whole town." "He'll try to flee the territory," Richard predicted. He has too much at stake to surrender. The stables, Sawyer realized. That's where he'll go first. Needs a fresh horse. Despite their exhaustion, Sawyer and Richard insisted on joining the search. Martha took Willow to the doctor's office where they could rest safely while awaiting news. Hours passed with no word. Willow paced anxiously, imagining all manner of terrible scenarios. When the door finally opened, she turned expectantly, only to find herself facing Terence Walsh, blood staining his shirt and a gun in his hand. "Miss Greene," he said through clenched teeth. "How fortunate. You'll be my ticket out of town." Willow backed away, looking for something to use as a weapon. The doctor was nowhere to be seen, likely called away to tend injuries from the morning's gunfight. "The marshal knows who you are, Whitfield," she said, using his real name deliberately. "You'll never escape justice now," Walsh laughed bitterly. "Justice is for fools and weaklings. I've evaded the law for years and will do so again." He gestured with his gun. "Now you're coming with me. She's not going anywhere with you." Sawyer stood in the doorway, his own gun aimed steadily at Walsh. The standoff lasted only seconds before Walsh grabbed Willow, pulling her against him as a shield, his gun pressed to her temple. "Drop your weapon, Preston, or she dies." Sawyer hesitated, his eyes meeting Willow's. She saw something there, a plan forming, a silent communication. Almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "All right," Sawyer said, slowly lowering his gun. "Just don't hurt her." As Walsh's attention focused on Sawyer, Willow made her move. She drove her elbow hard into his wounded side, causing him to howl in pain. His grip loosened enough for her to break free and drop to the floor. The gunshot was deafening in the small room. Walsh staggered backward, a look of surprise on his face as he collapsed against the wall, his unfired weapon clattering to the floor. Sawyer rushed to Willow, helping her to her feet and checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine." She looked at Walsh, who was gasping for breath, blood spreading across his chest. "Is he?" "He'll live," Sawyer said grimly. "Long enough to stand trial anyway." The marshal arrived moments later, quickly securing Walsh and calling for the doctor. Richard appeared behind him, relief washing over his face when he saw Willow safe. In the days that followed, order was restored to La Junta. Walsh, now known to all as Thomas Whitfield, was treated for his wounds, then transported under heavy guard to Denver to await trial for his numerous crimes. His foreman confessed to planting stolen cattle on Richard's property, clearing Richard's name completely. Martha Jenkins received compensation from the territorial government for her destroyed home, enough to build a new one. She refused to leave her land, declaring that "no criminal is going to drive me from my home." Richard's recovery progressed slowly but steadily. With his name cleared, he returned to his ranch, determined to rebuild what had been neglected during his absence. To everyone's surprise, he and Martha Jenkins developed a warm friendship that showed signs of blossoming into something more. A week after the dramatic events at the doctor's office, Willow stood on the porch of Sawyer's ranch house, watching the sunset. So much had changed in such a short time. She had arrived in Colorado a homeless teacher seeking refuge with her brother. Now she was considering a very different future. Sawyer joined her, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. "Penny, for your thoughts." "I was just thinking about how quickly life can change," she replied. 2 weeks ago, I didn't know you existed. And now," Willow turned to face him, "now I can't imagine my life without you in it." Sawyer's expression softened. "Does that mean you're staying?" "The school board offered me a position starting next month," she confirmed. "It seems La Junta needs a teacher after all." "And what about us?" Sawyer asked, taking her hands in his. "I know it's still early, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. These past 2 weeks have shown me exactly what kind of woman you are, Willow Greene. And what kind is that? The kind I want to build a life with. His voice was steady, his blue eyes sincere. Not today or tomorrow, but someday when you're ready. Willow felt a surge of happiness that almost took her breath away. I think I'd like that very much, Sawyer Preston. He leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a gentle kiss that held the promise of many more to come. As they stood together in the fading light, Willow knew she had found something she hadn't even known. She was looking for a home, a purpose, and a love born in danger but built to last a lifetime. 1 year later, on a perfect June day, Willow Greene became Willow Preston in a ceremony attended by the entire town of La Junta. Richard, fully recovered and quietly courting Martha Jenkins, gave his sister away with evident pride. The U.S. Marshal made a special trip to attend, bringing news that Thomas Whitfield had been sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for his crimes. Sawyer and Willow combined their properties, creating one of the most prosperous ranches in southeastern Colorado. Willow continued teaching at the town school, riding to and from the ranch each day on the mare Sawyer had given her as a wedding present. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch, watching the sunset paint the plains in gold and crimson, marveling at how a moment of crisis, a woman trapped, a man's brave rescue had changed the course of both their lives forever. And when their first child was born 2 years later, a strong, lunged boy, they named Jacob Richard Preston. Willow would tell him the story of how his father had once carried her from danger, and in doing so, had carried them both into a life neither could have imagined but both had come to treasure beyond measure.